Welcome to Fear and Greed, business news you can use. Today, some of Australia's best-known companies make the list of worst performers in 2025. The local housing market has a bumper week in the middle of the spring selling season, and around 500,000 Australians are taking weight loss drugs. Plus, moderate Liberals threaten to quit the front bench over net zero, and Qantas rolls out a new class of flying. It is Monday, the 10th of November, 2025. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, the main story this morning, some of Australia's best-known companies, including blue chips, CSL and James Hardie, have been among the worst performing stocks so far in 2025.
It has been quite remarkable. This year has been very unusual in that blue chip or near blue chip companies have been dumped by investors, and as have a bunch of high-profile names that were market favourites. Normally you get a bunch of tin pot miners being the worst performers. Not in 2025. Treasury Wine Estates, James Hardie, WiseTech Global, Telix Pharmaceuticals, Guzman y Gomez, Domino's and CSL have all fallen by somewhere between 35 and 50%. The worst performer this year has been Plumbing Group Reece, controlled by the Wilson family. Not really a blue chip because there are so few shareholders, but it has constantly been a great performer on the ASX. That was until March this year, when it outlined problems in its US business and much greater competition at home. Its share price has halved this year. Keep running down the list of 30% plus losses in 2025. Adviva Energy, Flight Centre and Block, owner of Afterpay. We're not talking about tiny miners where a commodity price has gone against them. These are cash flow positive businesses who have, for various reasons, been shunned by investors. I can't remember at any time since I've been reporting that the worst performing 12 stocks on the ASX 200 in this period of time, sort of in where we're 10 months through, are actually all well-known stocks.
There was certainly a hint of this during reporting season, wasn't there, when some of these blue chip companies, when you talk about Reece, James Hardie, CSL, on their results and also on the expectations of what was coming, they were dropping kind of 20% in a single day, which was just extraordinary. But they're quite varied. Is there a theme running across these companies, perhaps something that investors can draw on?
See, I was wondering that, and not really, though at a stretch, you could say those operating in the United States have had a harder time of it. Oh, yeah. Certainly the case for Reece. Treasury Wine Estates can throw into that. James Hardie, definitely. Of course, it bought that US business ASX. Block, owner of Afterpay. Telix Pharmaceuticals, very much out of the US. CSL, very much out of the US. Actually, I think I've just convinced myself that there is a theme. If you think of all those companies, just so much economic uncertainty in that market brought on by tariffs, inconsistent policy making. So whereas I started the sentence saying, I don't think there's any theme. Maybe there is a bit of a theme.
It does appear to be one
actually,
there, yes.
Macquarie Bank, like Macquarie Group, that's not, I think it's down 8% this year. You can't say it's one of the worst performers, though it is a poorly performing stock. That's very much about what's happened in the US as well. Aristocrat Leisure's down 9%. In fact, there's quite the theme here. Yes, operating in the US. Otherwise, WiseTech Global's been more about corporate governance concerns. Guzman y Gomez and Domino's more about valuations, where growth is coming from. The implication for investors in all of this is that perhaps some returns, including super fund returns, might not be quite as good as hoped. Very much a stock picker's market.
I think this is my favourite story, where you have actually convinced yourself midway through that you have solved the riddle. Okay, if we kind of put the rest of the year to one side, what about the weekend? Where did markets finish up over the weekend?
Well, on Friday, the S&P ASX 200 closed down 0.7% to 8,770 points, lowest close in 6 weeks. Anyone listening to the weekend edition would know that, Michael, because you used that as your favourite story for the week and didn't win the category. Just throwing that in.
Yep.
For the week, the market was down. The local market was down 1.3%. It's about 4% below its record. Wall Street closed slightly higher, though it was a really volatile session. Tesla tumbled, Nvidia tumbled, then it recovered its losses. The VIX, the volatility index, is at quite high levels at the moment. Over there, the US government shutdown is continuing, so there's a lack of economic data being released. That isn't helping. The information that is coming out, private sector data, such as the University of Michigan consumer sentiment data, that came out over the weekend. That's the main consumer sentiment reading in the US. It's going negative. That isn't helping. In terms of markets, the Aussie dollar starts the week buying 65 US cents. Bitcoin's trading just over 103,000 US dollars a unit. Gold's at just under 4,000 US dollars an ounce. And Brent crude is around 64 US dollars a barrel.
The lack of data in the US is one of the things that I talked to Diana Messina from AMP about today and the week ahead, which comes up after the show today. Just how difficult it is for the Fed in particular to try and kind of make decisions when all of the official data, most of the official data isn't coming through, and they're having to rely on all these partial kind of indicators that are released separately, and just how much of a minefield it is trying to make those decisions. That's coming up after the show, Fear and Greed Q&A, the week ahead today. Quick break, Sean. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, moderate Liberal MPs have warned that there will be front bench resignations if the party abandons a commitment to net zero emissions, while conservatives inside the team insist that net zero must be dumped.
The Conservatives argue there needs to be a clear delineation between the Libs and the government on the issue. The Liberal Party will hold a series of internal party meetings in Canberra this week to sort out the issue, though both sides appear to be becoming more entrenched. Now, I've got a mea culpa here. Last week we were talking about this week being the last week of parliamentary sitting. It's not. The Libs are in town, but actual parliament doesn't sit for another couple of weeks. The last sitting week is in a couple of weeks' time. Anyway, opposition frontbencher Andrew Bragg said abandoning net zero terminology in the party's climate policy was ridiculous, particularly given Australia's commitment under the Paris Agreement entered into under a coalition government. That agreement is to achieve net zero emissions in the second half of the century. Bragg indicated he would quit Susan Lee's shadow ministry if the party didn't stay in the Paris Agreement.
All right, let's talk property, Sean. The second busiest auction week of the year. The preliminary clearance rate over the last 7 days has come in at just under 72%, which really does suggest that the housing market is in pretty good health. Rude health, I think you would say.
Rude health, particularly given that more than 3,100 homes went to auction. More expected this coming week. We are in peak spring selling season. Michael, those lawns would be looking very flash. I'm sure your lawn's looking pretty good at the moment.
Oh, God, it's not. I did a full lawn renovation, which means you do kind of mow it right down and kind of rip out all of the thatch and everything. It looks disastrous, but it'll come good, Sean. Sorry, there's the update for anyone interested.
Yeah, those that don't know, Michael is a lawn porn man. He loves his lawn.
An enthusiast, Sean.
An enthusiast. The driver of the strong clearance rate result over the weekend was Melbourne. It jumped from 66% last week, which was, of course, affected by racing, to nearly 73%. Sydney came in at 70% over the past week, which was actually a little lower. Brisbane and Adelaide both came in around 78%, while the ACT 64%. Prices generally are holding up too, particularly for cheaper and mid-range homes. So I think we can say rude health, Michael.
Yeah, rude health indeed. And I love the fact that I use the opportunity to give an update on my lawn. And I actually said for anyone interested, I can guarantee you that there is nobody who is interested in hearing an update on how my lawn is going. How about this, though? Around 500,000 Australians are taking weight loss drugs every month, and almost 50% of users are actually buying them privately for up to $600 a month.
A study by the University of New South Wales, reported in the AFR, shows the surge in the usage of GLP-1 drugs, many of which have been pushed by influencers and celebrities. Sales of the medicines marketed under the brand names Ozempic and Mounjaro surged in the 5 years to April 2025. In that month, more than 6 million units or monthly jabs were sold in Australia, according to the data. The study measured sales and pharmaceutical benefit schemes data. Some in the medical profession fear that Australians are taking the drugs without a real medical need, despite uncertainty around their long-term side effects.
Plenty of corporate news around last Friday. We had Macquarie delivering a 6-month profit of $1.7 billion, helped by higher fees in the asset management business, although the result did miss expectations.
Yes, and Macquarie's share price fell 6% on Friday. Both operating income and costs were higher. Macquarie's Commodities and Global Markets division, its contributions slid 15% in the first half. There was also a write-down of offshore wind assets, particularly in the United States, with reference to our earlier comment about our earlier story about operating in the United States. Essentially, Macquarie has had some investment wins, including last month's announcement that it will sell a data center business in the US as part of a consortium for about $40 billion US dollars. That's the good news, but it's had some real compliance problems with the corporate regulator suing the group over alleged misreporting of trading.
Now, I think this next one's really interesting. Qantas is
They're all interesting, Michael. They're all interesting.
Yeah, I know, but if you're going to appeal to me here, you're either going to talk about lawn or you're going to talk about airlines. And so you've nailed this one, Sean. With
Good.
Qantas set to roll out a new class of flying for domestic travel, you've already got economy and you've already got premium economy. And Economy Plus is going to kind of slip somewhere in the middle there.
So it's targeted at the shrinking number of corporate flyers, particularly those attracted to Virgin's economy. Is it Economy X products Virgin calls it? I can't remember how they call it. Yeah. So they have that Economy X at Virgin. All carriers' domestic loads have been hit somewhat by job losses at big corporates outside of mining. So the fly-in, fly-out model's working well. But the banks, for example, have announced cost-cutting measures. That's hurt the airlines. Also, COVID, of course, changed work patterns forever, including the use of teleconferencing. Qantas's response is to create the new class with up to 40% more legroom, priority boarding, and access to overhead baggage space. Now, those who travel know that all priority boarding means is that you actually get to the overhead baggage space before everyone else. So that's how that works. The announcement came as Qantas said it expects domestic revenue to rise, though not as much as previously forecast, while leisure, small and medium-sized business and resource demand remains strong. The international revenue outlooks remain solid, though expected revenue is slightly lower for the current half year on the back of a delay in A380s returning to the sky, helping later in the year with the upcoming Ashes Test cricket series. Put all that together. Investors not really impressed, notwithstanding the new category for domestic travel. Qantas' share price fell 7% on Friday.
Two more quick ones, Sean. Online property group REA reported a 4% rise in revenue for the September quarter and a jump in listings.
While listings were, yields were higher, actually, not a jump in listings, but the yields were definitely higher, especially in Australia. Home sellers are opting for premium products and buying add-on products. Realestate.com.au gets 12.6 million monthly visitors a month. That's a lot.
That is a significant number. And the two big media companies, News Corp and Nine Entertainment, both released earnings updates.
That's right. News Corp's quarterly report shows a small jump in revenue for the September quarter. Dow Jones and Digital Real Estate Services, i.e. REA, they lead the way. News Corp Australia had a strong quarter with a sharp drop in costs, helping the bottom line. News Corp's share price rose 3% on Friday. At the Nine Entertainment AGM on Friday, Peter Tonner replaced Catherine West as the chair. Stan is doing well for that company. It's expected to continue more earnings growth with higher revenue, offsetting a jump in costs, though Nine's share price closed down 2% on Friday.
And some sad news overnight, Sean. John Laws passed away yesterday. The man known as Golden Tonsils with his golden microphone spent 7 decades in talkback radio.
Began his career in 1953 in Bendigo, worked most of his career in Sydney, before retiring just 1 year ago, a true legend of the media.
Yes, indeed. Turning to international news now, and COP30 starts in Brazil tonight with the key message likely to be that efforts to tackle climate change are moving too slowly.
It's the 30th annual UN climate meeting. The COP acronym stands for Conference of the Parties. The parties are the nearly 200 countries that have signed up to the original UN Climate Change Agreement of 1992. World leaders actually gathered late last week and over the weekend. The conference begins tonight, our time. Over the next 2 weeks, negotiators from those 200 countries will thrash out the technical details on everything from how best to cut emissions to the structure of funds to help the poorest deal with the impacts of increasingly extreme weather. According to Bloomberg, any final deal will involve finding a consensus that can be tolerated by both the world's biggest fossil fuel producers and the small island states on the front lines of sea level rising at a time when other issues like trade and war are displacing climate from the top of the international agenda.
And finally, Sean, a super typhoon has made landfall in the Philippines, where more than 900,000 people have been evacuated.
It's happening as we go to air this morning. The storm has sustained winds of nearly 200 kilometres an hour, gusts of up to 230 kilometres an hour. The eye of the storm hit the Aurora province in Luzon, which is the Philippines' most populous island. The latest typhoon comes just days after a previous storm left nearly 200 people dead.
All right, up next is Fear and Greed Q&A. Today it is the week ahead with Diana Messina, Deputy Chief Economist from AMP. It's coming up in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. All about labour force data coming out this week and a bunch of other things. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Monday, the 10th of November, 2025. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.